Morning. It is the second Sunday in November, and you know what the second Sunday means? That means Tom Whitmore has scoured the planet and come up with an epic guest for your enjoyment. Now, I'm at OryCon. Obviously, you don't see the beautiful background of my study, but Tom has had to stay home and take care of his kitten. And show him your kitten, Tom.
Well, the kitten has stepped away for the moment, but will be back.
Oh, it'll be back. So
Yeah.
anyway, Tom,
Her name
I
is
am
Anne
passing
Bonny, and
on
she
to
only has one eye.
I'm passing on to you,
All right.
and introduce us to your guest.
Well, my guest today is Danny Carnahan, who has been an active member of the folk and rock music communities for decades now. An amazing musician and somebody who really loves science fiction and fantasy, who was a longtime customer in our store and who I just find incredibly fun to talk to. We're going to talk a lot about science fiction, music, and probably a bunch of other things because this thing always gets off topic. So we've got a couple of people signing in on the chat. I'm not going to put this into full screen because that way I would lose the chat. But Danny, would you like to say a few words about what some of your projects have been?
What? Hello. For those who don't know me, I'm a Bay Area based musician. I've been in the Celtic crowd since the mid 70s. And I sort of accidentally wandered into an association with multi-instrumentalist Chris Caswell, who was at the time playing with Robin Williamson. And I inherited Chris from Robin, and we went off and became somewhat notorious in the late 70s and into the mid 80s as Caswell Carnahan.
One of your albums, Borderlands, the title song, could have been considered science fiction or fantasy, either one.
I've always thought it was a fairy tale or a fantasy. Yes, it's definitely a fantasy. It involves time slipping and
alternate worlds.
Alternate worlds, and actually, we'll talk about how this actually ties in with another song that I wrote later called "True Thomas," which is based on a Middle English ballad that has time slippage involved from the 15th and 16th centuries. So it's an established sort of theme. And mythic tendrils have invaded my writing all my career from time to time. It's not a central sort of pillar these days, but I write about lots of things. So I play various stringed things and compose on the piano, but and I've been involved in, I think at last count, between 40 and 50 different albums. And 13 or 14 of them are my own. And I've written 3 novels that involve mythic literature and Irish music and death. 3 fun things that I'm interested in.
Death is always interesting.
Oh yes, and it makes for it's fun to write about, especially when you're on this side of the keyboard and are not involved in the actual death part.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably more out there to write about, but I'm currently raising a teenager, so that's occupying most of my waking time these days. So
it tends to be very occupying.
Yeah, and for me, novel writing is a very isolating art form. I have to sort of.
Someone just posted a link to your Apple Music discography.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, there's there's a lot of stuff out there. I think I got 50 or 60 songs out on YouTube and various places. So there's lots to sort of get your trudge your muddy footprints through.
Yes, but you say that science fiction and fantasy isn't being a major part of your writing these days. why does it change? Why that rather than
Oh, interests shift. I'll get sort of stuck into a particular sort of mindset. Sometimes I've lately with the unpleasantness that is pretty much all over the front pages of the world. I've been reminded how often I'm driven to writing somewhat angry songs about political stupidity and war and people being unkind to one another. I remember the day after the Desert Storm in 1991, I sat down and wrote an exceedingly angry song, which I still sing sometimes.
all agreed, let's have a war?
That's the one.
Yes.
And sort of, I was playing along with a Nick Jones guitar album, and he had this wonderful sort of Northern English tune form called a rant, kind of an odd. I guess it's danceable, but I never seen anyone dance to a rant. But it was a rant, and it was just this wonderful percussive banging thing, and I was getting angrier and angrier, and the rant became angrier and angrier, and then suddenly the song sort of slotted itself on top of the guitar part, and that became that. So sometimes it's politics. Sometimes I get all mushy inside and start writing love songs.
Well, then of course there's Lunatic Love, which
Lunatic Love. Yes. Well, I was young once. And
there are fantasy elements in that too.
Well, some things are geographically sort of triggered. I wrote a slug of things when I lived briefly on Haight Street in San Francisco, sort of in between a long stint in Marin County and then where I am now in the East Bay. Been in this house in Albany now for 38 years. But
Wow.
But living on Haight Street was a hoot. Being in your 30s and just the energy on the street, just like right around the corner from the old Grateful Dead house, and there's something about that, and so the people on the street would inspire me to do things, and just the energy of that part of town. And Lunatic Love is about living in an apartment on Haight Street.
Uh-huh.
One writes about what one knows.
Yes. Well, and of course, that's the area where the Jefferson Airplane was, and they won a Hugo Award for Blows Against the Empire.
Indeed, they did. Yeah, I was lucky enough to actually get to know those guys later in their careers. Open for Starship at the Fillmore once, and hung out with Cantner, of blessed memory, so. He was quite an inspiration. I loved his, and he was very intense. The thing is that when he got around to writing about anything, he did it intensely, and I think that was one of the things that powered the appeal of Blows Against the Empire, because that really was a strong piece of work. Hello, Kat.
Yes, this is Anne Bonny. She's our new kitten.
All right.
She was named by the Adams County rescue people because she only has one eye.
All right.
And Anne Bonny was a famous female pirate.
Matey. Yes.
Yes. We've got her a pirate ship to play in, but that's a whole other issue.
Yes, pirates. I actually recently wrote a song about pirates called "Buried Treasure." It's actually just a sort of tangentially about pirates, but mostly about love.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, love is often a buried treasure.
It is indeed.
Yes.
But
going back to Cantner, he's also once was called a plagiarist for taking a song almost word for word from a rant by John Wyndham in Rebirth, Crime of Creation.
Right. Well, I have a hard time with the plagiarism issue, because there's so many ways to sort of recast literature and poetry and things. And nowadays there's so many different sort of venues and ways to present any or all of a poem or a lyric or a novel. Um, so as far as I'm concerned, anything that gets good thoughts and good language out there is probably fair game.
Mhm.
I have borrowed freely from from the folk world, from 1,000 years of balladry written by who knows who, and some things that are written by people that I actually can identify, and to the extent that I can credit them, I do. But it doesn't mean I don't use their stuff and you know
Mhm.
go on with
Yeah.
it.
Well, Kantner didn't credit Wyndham, which was
Well,
one of the reasons people got slightly upset, I think.
well, that's not for me to say. It's,
Yeah.
no dog in that hunt.
Mhm. Yes, the cat keeps playing with our internet connection, so I'm hoping that she won't do anything to disconnect us.
Uh-huh.
So,
Well, I like the chat here. It says, in regards to angry stories, the oral history in songs survives even when the books are gone. That is so true. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. Not a lot of people bother to or even know to read Francis James Child's English and Scottish ballads, a 5-volume uh, set that I spent probably I don't know, thousands of hours over the years pouring through for bits and pieces. But yeah, it's a lot of the stuff that's out there comes from those books, and even though most people don't know that it came from the books, it's still out there and
mhm.
continues to prevail.
And there are all these wonderful references to things that aren't necessarily there, but that are useful to have as shorthand, like the Vicar of Bray.
Okay.
There are so many politicians for whom the Vicar of Bray would be a perfect theme song, a song about somebody who changed his religion so long as he could remain in charge.
Funny how that works. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We certainly
Politicians
see
haven't
that with
changed much in
politicians.
1,000 years.
Hmm?
Politicians haven't changed much in 1,000 years.
No, no. Yes.
Yeah, actually, I wrote a song about that as well. Guy Fawkes, a thing called "Penny for
Yes.
the Sky."
Yes.
Things haven't changed much in 400 years.
Yes.
It's the winners write the history.
Mhm.
The losers. If you screw up your one chance, there you go. You're the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, but there are plenty of people who screwed up one chance and then got another.
Yeah, the lucky ones.
One can look at Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I would think. Yeah, I think that is an interesting one. That his second chance was unique. It was,
Mhm.
you could say it was the second chance in life, but it was kind of his first chance to be superior to most other human beings, to demonstrate the Gandhian
Mhm.
uh, uh, ideal of nonviolent, the power of nonviolence. I mean, it's only happened maybe 3 times in that entire century.
Mhm.
Gandhi, King, and Mandela showed that nonviolence is actually more powerful than violence, and he prevailed. It's a lesson that apparently has been lost on the current generation of leaders, and no one has got the guts or the wherewithal to uh, try that route. I would love to live long enough to see it done again, though hopes are not that high. Certainly possible. You never know when somebody like Mandela is going to come along.
No, we never. You don't know what's going to happen until it happens.
Yeah. Um, God knows, we've lived through some pretty unexpected and peculiar events in our time on this planet.
Yeah.
It's been quite a wild ride last couple of generations.
Well, every generation is a wild ride. It's kind of odd to be there for any point of history.
It is, and I guess it's I guess there are a couple of tricks. One trick is to notice what's going on. And another trick is to not let the crap completely destroy your faith in the future and make you curl up into a ball and run away. My reaction to most of the negative stuff is to write songs, because
Mhm.
I can usually get away with saying saying things that would get me thrown out of office if I were the kind of person to want to be in office. I can say things in public in a song, and people can make of them what they will. And uh, I can be true to myself, and maybe, I don't know if I can persuade anybody, but I can at least validate somebody else's already existing beliefs. Yeah, I don't I don't know that my song. I'm not a Woody Guthrie or a I don't know, Malvina
Or even a
Reynolds.
Tom Paxton, perhaps.
God, wouldn't that be nice to be Tom Paxton?
And he's a
No,
nice guy too.
he is. He is. I ran into him in a couple of festivals back when I was playing festivals back east, and he was unquestionably sweet and generous.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the function of the musician, the lyricist at this point is somewhat similar to the function of uh, more the function of a jester than of a bard.
I don't know. It would be problematic to hold Bob Dylan up as an exemplar, because he seems to be the unicorn. He seems to be unique.
Mhm.
Um, uh, but It's a little both. Um, but Jester, in the Shakespearean sense,
Yeah.
as the person who is able to tell the truth because nobody is really threatened by him.
Mhm.
Um, but what he says is really what you walk away from the theater remembering.
Mhm.
Um, the Yeah, there's in at best, yeah, songwriter can aspire to that role. Um, but what was the other part? The other
The,
option,
the jester versus the bard.
the bard. Well, yeah, the bard. It's funny. Bard, I guess. I have been a lover of ballads forever. I don't
Mhm.
know why. I don't know how long, how early it was. My dad was an English schoolboy, who grew up with all that stuff, and raised me, reading Robert Burns, and he was the one who brought Tolkien into the house before it was even available in this country.
Well,
Uh,
it was available in this country right from the start, but
well,
it
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
widely available. That's
yeah.
that's a whole other
It was
story.
popular, and nobody, it hadn't hit the sort of zeitgeist yet. I found a copy of The Hobbit in fifth grade in a school
Mhm.
bookstore in 1962,
Mhm.
and so I was ahead of by 4 or 5 years. And anybody in my crowd knew about that. And then Dad brought the British Lord of the Rings in '65 or '66,
Mhm.
and
Second edition.
and
Yeah.
yeah, when and Alan and Unwin, and so yeah, ballads as sort of the stories that society tells to make sense of what's going on. Uh, ballads are sort of partly aspirational. They tell unlikely stories of people who are born into a particular uh, layer of society, who make it to the next layer through
Mhm.
either happenstance or skill or love or violence, or something wrenching happens, and they
Mhm.
go from being a farmer to being a prince, from being a scullery maid to being a princess. Um, these some of that is just to sort of to kind of placate the other billion people on Earth who die in exactly the same stratum that they were born in.
Mhm.
Just to sort of give them the notion that it's vague, it's theoretically possible. And then there's the balladry that recounts actual things that happened
Mhm.
with editorial spin. Um, all those various tales about kings and princes and wars and so on that there were bits and pieces of actual history in there, but a lot of it was propaganda.
Yeah.
The purpose of which to make the victor look more victorious, and the bad guy, the loser, look a lot worse and worthy of being the loser.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I give you Richard III, for instance.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but uh, the yeah, so some balladry is storytelling, and storytelling is not always truth telling. Storytelling is spin, and
The comment from the anonymous Facebook user that you got to be able to read the room and determine just how deep the surgeon masquerading as a jester needs to cut and how much healing the bard needs to provide.
yeah, well, and the bard doesn't always know that,
Mhm.
uh, or do it artfully.
And it's
It's not.
different in live performance than it is in print.
It is. It is. Well, because in print or in recording, that's kind of the modern, another modern kind of print,
Mhm.
is that it persists. It's something that is repetitive. You say something once, and then it can be read, any number of times in by any number of people in any number of contexts, and they're bringing into the experience whatever they're bringing into, and you don't have any control. You're not in the room. And you can't, if they raise their eyebrows and they object to a single line, you can't explain why that line is important, or that they got that wrong. um, uh, or say, read another paragraph down, please, because there's more context down here, and it'll make more sense later. But yeah, but there is a responsibility, and to read the room. I must say, over the years, there's sometimes I've been in concert, and I will sort of strategically change either an introduction to a song, or I will eliminate it entirely, because I figure that this crowd is just not going to be receptive to what I have to say here. I've done that.
Mhm. Interesting. How how do you know?
I don't know if "no" is the right word. You sort of sense it, and you sort of skate along with it. A long time ago, I stopped experiencing stage fright, because there's, what's the worst thing can happen? Nobody's going to get up and shoot me. Um,
Unless you're Salman Rushdie.
Happily, I'm not Salman Rushdie,
Mm.
and yeah, but yeah, I would just figure that any hole I dig, I could probably dig myself out of,
Mhm.
and that are also armed with sort of going into it with the notion that I'm not lying to anybody. I'm actually telling people what I believe is the truth,
Mhm.
and I can stand by that. And if I do that, uh, uh, also, the fact that they're in the room by definition is that they want to like me, and they're not in there, sort of, spoiling for a fight, or an adversarial relationship, mostly. And so they'd be open to me, plastering over any problems that arise on the fly.
Mhm.
And after doing this for 40 mumble years, you know, I I've never gotten into any major altercations with anybody in a live setting.
Mhm.
There are people who've told me they don't like what I do. There was somebody in Santa Cruz. I'm trying to remember which song it was. Oh, I remember it was an Irish song called "Who Wears the Breeches," and it was about two thoroughly and equally dislikable people who happen to be married to each other, and they're just like, the song is about how they just kind of just beating the snot out of each other, and I don't know why I liked the song. It was fun to sing, but I didn't think it carried much political weight. But I sang this in Santa Cruz, and at halftime, this woman came up to me, absolutely just scandalized, and demanded her money back, saying that she was furious with me for singing a song in public that glorified domestic violence. I go, oh, well, the song I just sang, each of them was equally nasty to the other. It wasn't like it was anti-women or anything, but okay, here's your money. That's about as close to acrimony as I've experienced in a live setting. And here's to the oral tradition. Somebody wrote that song, 500 years ago, and it's been sung ever since. So there you go. The song wins.
The song often does. It's part of writing the history, is writing the songs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a power and a responsibility in there somewhere.
One of the places where the victor isn't necessarily the person who writes it.
No. And that's kind of interesting, because it's funny. Like, you don't really own a song once you put it out into the world. It's in an important sense, it's not yours anymore. And I've had dozens of times. I've had people send me recordings of covers of songs that I wrote, saying, I want you to, thank you very much. Here's $10 or whatever, or maybe not. Here's $10, but here's a song that I wrote. That's, you wrote this song. I recorded this song. Isn't this nice? And I think, without exception, I've hated them, the covers, and then I kind of like say, well, but no, this is a little gentle reminder to myself that it's not mine anymore, and that they turn it into something of their own, and it says something entirely different. Whatever it is that I don't like, is that I wouldn't have said it that way, or they missed the point, or but there it is. You sit out there, and on the flip side of that is that the nice thing about writing a song like that is that is a kind of a little flavor of immortality, that I figure that after I'm dead, somebody I never met hums one of my songs in the shower, I win.
Yeah. Wamba has a great song called "It's a Pickle."
I've made the right.
Yeah, which says basically, the song, if you preserve the song and put it up on a shelf and it's rarely played, that's not music, that's a pickle.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah, and there's various comments here, kind of sidling up here about live performance, and all good observations.
Well, we have an excellent audience.
Good.
Is what it comes down to.
So anybody, it's self-selecting. These are people who think and listen, and I like that. It's helpful.
You also can write well enough to be able to convey what they think.
Yeah, they communicate with language. Yeah, and if just on any given day, the rest of the world doesn't really argue for that. There's a whole lot of people out there are inarticulate and rageful and doing inexplicably stupid things, and it's nice to remember.
Explicably stupid, but yeah.
And the part of a good and healthy part of humanity is actually worth sharing the planet with. So hello everybody, and I'm really glad you're here, and thank you. And I'll try to address any of the comments that seem to be addressable. But a lot of the stuff is just very apt and worthy observation. Yeah. But, I was just trying to think if I've ever put any new history into the world. I don't know if you're familiar with this one. There's a song I wrote 40 years ago called Loch Rask.
I remember it.
And
I knew most of your canon.
Yeah, recorded that way back on an album called Journeys of the Heart. But it's about a battle in the west of Ireland and it involved, and this is definite sci-fi fantasy stuff, where
I've got the album on the shelf right over here
excellent.
under
The
C and the CDs.
the the deal was, I was staying in a little B&B run by a pair of old characters, Bernie and Doreen Common, in Ballyvaughan, and they lived on the shores of this little pond that had the audacity to call itself a lake, Loch Rask, and they said that in like some 500 years ago, 600 years ago, whenever there's a battle there at the lake,
Mhm.
and there was an army, a local army marched east to battle an army that was coming from the west, or no, west going to the east, uh, and when they got to Loch Rask, uh, the apparition of an old hag apparently appeared over the middle of, hovering over the middle of Loch Rask,
Hmm.
and and held out her finger and warned O'Loughlin, the leader of the Western Army, said, "Don't do this, because if you do this, you'll all die. This is a fool's errand. Do not go to war." And he ignored her and went off, and yes, indeed, they all died.
Mhm.
It's the old mythic, save one who managed to stagger home and tell the story that they should have listened to the hag, and then he died.
Yeah.
Which is how it works. And
Cassandra
so
is always right.
and I just thought that was such a great. And I said, I've never heard of this tale. I've never heard of this battle. What the hell? And he said, yeah, it really happened. But nobody had ever written a ballad about it, and I sort of felt incumbent upon me to do that. And so I did a little bit of research, and I wrote the song. And it was like 35 years later that I get a letter from a historian in Ireland, who wanted to use my lyrics in the book that he had written about obscure battles in Ireland.
Mhm.
And he then said, well, he then provided the real historical rigor,
Mhm.
the real names and dates and so on, to the thing. So I now actually know everything about both of the armies that fought and when they fought, and managed to get a little byline in the book that he wrote,
Congratulations.
and which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And apparently the only thing I got wrong was I'd set the battle in the winter, because it made for a better, the snow sort of figured in the imagery of my last verse,
Mhm.
but apparently it didn't happen in the snow. But other than that, I got it right. And but the Hag of Loch Rask is this kind of very localized fantasy story that sort of lingers in County Clare, and it hasn't really made it farther than that. But I figured it was just too delicious to not pass that along to a larger world.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and that kind of story is all over the place. You have Arthur Machen's story, The Bowman, about armed, yeah, but ghosts armed with bows and arrows showing up to protect people in World War One,
Ah.
which he made up completely, and then it
Okay,
turned into something that was that people believe happened.
well, that's a whole different conversation, isn't it? I mean, that sort of, yeah. Well, but why not? I mean, all he did was he made up that particular tale about
Mhm.
in that particular context, but the theme just cascades over centuries. It's not. I suppose that's fair, because somebody's got to be the first to tell the story,
Mhm.
and who's to say that they were right?
Yeah.
They don't always admit to being oh, I made that up.
Yes, Machen did, which is an interesting thing to hear later on.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious to know more about his motivation there. Why? I mean, you could just as easily have just clammed up and let it pretend to be a legend, and then a generation later, after he's gone, it is.
Mhm.
No
Well,
one,
it is now. You know.
no one would be the wiser. Well, it is because probably 9 out of 10 people don't bother to go back and know about the genesis of the song
Mhm.
or the story.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun, the kind of cultural blindness or willful blindness or willful ignorance, which has helped lots and lots of stories persevere over time.
I think that's very common with ghost stories in general.
Yeah, yeah,
They become more remembered as if they were true than people think about.
yeah, yeah. Um, and there's, I admit that there are stories out there that I don't know if they're true, that I've heard in
Mhm.
my time, but I'd like to believe they're true. And so
Mhm.
because I have no way of knowing one way or the other, I choose to believe that they're true. And that's just an act of actual volition of, I am
Mhm.
consciously deciding to believe this with, based on nothing but my, sort of internal hope that the message of this of whatever the story is trying to say is true. That I'd
Many
like.
people do that with religion.
I think that's kind of definitional.
Yeah.
You can't know, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's the measure of it. How strongly can you believe something that you can't know?
The truth is that you do know it, but you can't prove it. You know,
Yeah,
I keep saying that many people know things that I believe are not true.
yeah.
You know, they know it. They absolutely know it and believe it.
Oh, this is quite the case, and we're living in a time, a little chapter of history right now where we're stuck in a lot of that. There's a lot of two parallel realities
Mm.
uh, sort of marching together, like right next to each other, and not overlapping at all.
Yeah.
And one marcher over here is not able to speak to the one on the other side. And who's to say? It's and yeah, like, we're going into an election year where we have two two sets of people who are going to be marching into voting booths, and they believe entirely different things, and it's
Mhm.
kind of interesting to kind of postulate, oh, what's going to happen there. So
And each side believes that they are objectively deciding this rather than
yeah,
they believe that they know.
well, that's right. And how very different is this from the times of Martin Luther,
Mhm.
or the times when the Catholic Church was dividing up the South America into the Portuguese and the Spanish. Or who knows? There's lots of uh, lots of historical precedent for that,
Mhm.
and Lord knows people have been thinking about that and writing about that ever since time.
Mhm.
Uh, so what's this here? Looking at it.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
people we comment that it feels asymptotic. Asymptotic to what? Or I think people are more diverging than approaching an asymptote.
yeah. That's a difficult term to kind of shoehorn into the public discourse.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, yeah, well, so I don't know that I have any responsibility to convince anybody of anything. Uh, I, I I am interested in what interests me, and
But but do you have a responsibility for having convinced people?
interesting. Well, I don't know. Nobody's ever hauled me into court. Um,
Well, responsibility is different from blame.
Yeah, that's true. Well, blame. I will not blame myself. I think blame is something that one is. It's responsibility to oneself. You know, the court could make me responsible for something I don't feel any blame for.
Mhm.
But no, not really. No, I'm not responsible for that. Yeah, you put stuff out into the world, and people make of it what they will.
Mhm.
Um, I yeah, I don't hold people responsible for any of the things that I have picked up on the way and carried and built my belief system or my ethical structure, you know, out of. Yeah, I'm too egomaniacal. You know, I did it myself with my own little hatchet, and you know, with the tools that were available to me. Um, and so, you know, when to the extent that I am a creature of the public and put things out into the public sphere, I am a tool. People can use that tool, and
Mhm.
it's up to them. It's up to them to decide what to do with it.
Mhm.
And good luck to them.
Hard to move on from that particular point.
Have to move sideways, Tom.
Yeah, and we do.
You promised me there were lots of sideways to go. Yeah,
Haven't we managed to do so far?
I'm not keeping track. I just do what the voices tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, the audience appears to be enjoying it at least.
Fantastic. Thank
They're
you.
continuing to respond.
Thanks
It's
for
so nice to have an audience that we can actually hear from.
yeah. Oh, I like that. Hey, okay, nameless Facebook user. I don't think you have a responsibility for convincing someone else of something. I think you have an obligation to make sure that your position is an honorable one. Good point.
Well,
Yes, absolutely.
even more, one that you honor.
Oh, well, that's the thing. Is it you know, and there's something about balladry that I have always appreciated, and it's, I think that's drawn me to balladry, is that the people who write the ballads, I think really they're not trying to blow smoke. They really believe what they're saying,
Mhm.
and w- that they bother to do it in the first place means that's something that they think is important enough to lock down into a ballad to communicate to other human beings. And uh, and so if you go into reading lyrics and ballads and poems through the centuries with that in mind, you know, there's what you have to ask yourself: who is this person that wrote this, and why was this important enough to them to write? You know, and you know, what is this saying beyond the actual words on the page about the subject or about the person who wrote it? And and I find sort of imagining these people to be a wonderful thing that I've done all my life. Is that like, you know, when I first was reading Tolkien, I uh, I remember like quite often, as you know, I'm a mid teenager, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out, who is this Tolkien person? You know, how and why did he do this?
Mhm.
And then I started really early on, kind of realized that, you know, this Elvish is based on Finnish
Mhm.
largely. Who's this English scholar who's fanatically enamored of the Finnish language, and why should he think that this uh, strange mythical race should speak a variant of that, and that should be sort of redolent of Elvish culture
Mhm.
and grace, and how did he come? You know, how? And so I was you know, equally interested in Tolkien as a scholar as I was with what he was writing. As it happens, I phoned him up once.
Really?
I did. In 1968, my family was in England, and Dad was taking us around to visit the schools he went to, and he went to a school down in the Salisbury Plain, and we found ourselves in Oxford. And I sort of said, gosh, I wonder, I'd love to like have a talk with Tolkien. He said, well, why don't you phone him up? I go, huh? And he said, well, he said, look in the phone book. They're in the hotel room. I look in the Oxford phone book. Sure as hell, Tolkien is in the phone book. Well, what the heck? What can I lose? So, 16-year-old kid. I phoned him up. I did not talk to him. His son Christopher answered the phone, and so I talked to him.
Okay.
And he was very polite, very nice, but I never. But I was, it would have been kind of cool if I'd known more. I would have known, where to find him, like on the street, because he was apparently not hard to find.
Yes.
In his rambles, but I wasn't quite that adventurous. But,
Yes. I once ran into Kurt Vonnegut on the streets of New York, but didn't have anything to say to him.
yeah, so you just sort of nodded.
Nodded, acknowledged, and walked away.
Yeah. I've done that in New York. You can do that. You get that look, from the person, and
Yes.
you just sort of look and say, "Yeah, I know who you are," and no, I'm not going to talk to you, and they kind of thank you briefly and then move on. All silent.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Both of those are an interesting thing leading into the question of what is history, and how do ballads, of course, you're saying, make history personal.
Yeah, they do.
That they bring us. When I was in high school, I had a history teacher who was a disciplinarian, and that turned me off to history completely.
I'm sorry about that.
And later, my father got sent a diary from one of his cousins, the first entry of which was December 25th, 1776, Valley Forge, cold today. And reading through that diary pointed out to me just how personal all this stuff that we learn about in history was, and how similar the people were of that time to people now in terms of the way they thought.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And when you realize that history is not what general fought what battle, general at what battle,
On what date, at what time.
what kingdom conquered what other kingdom. It's a single human story.
Mhm.
It's a story. I mean, the Civil War ballads that still get sung are about a single soldier.
Yeah.
And a single experience, often on a single day.
Yeah.
And that's history.
Well, the Red Badge of Courage.
And it's a single person's experience. And the lesson is that person, the heart that beat in that chest is exactly the same as mine, 100 years, 200 years, 500 years later.
Mhm.
And I am persuaded to think that if all history was taught as individual experience and not the experience of generals on battlefields, we would have fewer battlefields. Because it's easy to misunderstand and then to hate someone you can feel absolutely no human affinity for.
Mhm.
But if to the extent that you can realize that this person is exactly like you,
Mhm.
it becomes impossible to hate them, and then maybe impossible to kill them. That all those people put their socks on one at a time. All those people, wake up in the morning trying to feed their children.
Mhm.
All those people have exactly the same basic human drives and loves and fears that you do.
Mhm.
And ballads work really hard to personalize the larger stories of the human race, and they universalize it by allowing you, the listener, the single listener, to someone singing a single ballad about a single person's experience. You can then put yourself into that person's shoes and experience that. Even if it's a bizarre, impossible, fantastical experience, but you can be there with them.
Even if it's going to Elfland.
Well, there you go. Yes, even if it's going to Elfland, and then that sends you off into, all right, well, is there an Elfland? And if so, is it just, do they describe it the way I would believe it would be? Like, how can I know? And I'd better go back to Child's Ballads and read the other 65 versions of Thomas the Rhymer and see if there's a better, a more cogent way of putting this story than the one that Carnahan wrote. But yeah, I guess to that extent, I take my job seriously. That humanizing and personalizing larger stories is something that balladry can do. Um, and yeah, and then some people, some balladeers are better at it than others, and some are just by dint of luck and happenstance. Their work cuts a wider swath through popular culture. People like Martin Carthy have been around for 50 years, and so lots and lots of people have heard Martin's versions of fantastical tales, and have heard his sort of take on things. And to know Martin personally, you realize that he has done some remarkable political work in his life, in his artistic life, because he is a real humanist and a real socialist, and with ever so artful subtlety, he has woven that human view into his balladry. And so this body of work that he is leaving behind has a little persuasive point to it.
His work with his wife has also done that. Norma is not worth leaving out of this.
No, not at all. But
and Eliza too.
I admire her greatly. I did not know Norma, but I did encounter Martin any number of times over the years, and
I've met him a few times myself, and he is an impressive man.
Yeah,
very quiet.
Oh, he set me off. Actually, I guess I can. He sort of set me off in my balladry. He would be the guy, because I didn't know who he was. I didn't know him from a bale of hay, as somebody once said. And I wandered into the Aberdeen Folk Club when I was 17, and there he was as the guest. And after 2 hours, I was like this puddle, and I just didn't know what hit me, and I shoehorned him after the, buttonholed him. That's the word I was looking for. Buttonholed him after the set, and I asked him something about how he played. I think it was Prince Heathen, and he sat me down. And he showed me the guitar tuning he was using, and changed my life. I've used that tuning ever since. So yeah, so dear Martin is singularly responsible for the path that I chose. I came home after from not knowing him at all. I acquired all the albums that he had come up with, that he recorded up to that point, which I think was 3, and went from there.
Yeah, he went from there too. He's still going.
He did. Oh, bless his heart. I love the man. I love the man. Dead do not fight battles. Tell me again that the dead do not fight battles for you. They don't. Yeah, but we are fighting battles for the dead. daily, aren't we?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we're fighting both for the dead and the living.
Indeed. We're trying to see here. Oh, I see. I learned more history from reading James Michener than in school. He made it human. Yeah, good.
Mhm.
Good point. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, good history. Good history is definitely uh, that which is made individual and human. I would say that some of what I learned as history turned out to be may or may not have been made up, which is Robert Graves.
Mhm.
From Robert Graves is from his Greek and Roman mythology to the White Goddess.
Mhm.
And the infuriating thing about Graves, and the thing that I actually I wrapped an entire novel around, is a song called "Fortune Turns the Wheel," that's based on the White Goddess. And the thing about it, the stuff that he presents as historical fact, none of it, he has no footnotes, no proof whatsoever, and so no one knows how much of the stuff that he is presenting as cultural and historical fact is actually fact or stuff that he just made up because it was handy. And this is part of the thing. I don't really care.
Feels right, though.
It feels right, exactly, and
It makes sense in terms of the ways I think, or the people around me think, or what I see people doing.
or no, a lot of the stuff was stuff that was completely out of my world. It was stuff that
Mhm.
coming, like stuff that, like, all this stuff about the power of the trees and what they were saying, and how they connected with the various deities
Mhm.
and the various races that one by one managed to find their way to the British Isles from elsewhere, and yeah,
Mhm.
I had nothing to base uh, my belief on, or my willingness to suspend disbelief. I just sort of kind of took it all in, and ended up deciding that some of it sounded convincing enough,
Mhm.
and slotted in enough with my life experience, and with what I was noticing around me elsewhere. And I wish to God that Graves was still around. I'd love to
Mhm.
sit him down and ask him, well, so what the fuck was that all about? Did you,
Mhm.
did you really make that up, or did you read that someplace and then just burn your notes?
Mhm.
And why? Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's similar to Kipling's fairy stories.
yeah. Well,
His whole set of English history in there is very much, I think it's made up, but there's a feeling to it that feels right.
feels right. I think he borrowed a whole lot of that from stuff that he heard in India,
Mhm.
and then sort of reconstituted. And fair play to him. I mean, that's what you do.
Well, the stories of India were certainly things he was hearing from people around him, but I was thinking more of Rewards and Fairies and Puck of Pook's Hill.
Yeah, but
That's English.
I would argue that Puckapook's Hill is flavored at least slightly by the Indian influences,
Mhm.
and just the details have been shifted.
Mhm.
Uh, the relationship between the natural world and the supernatural world, um, that couldn't have been sort of incidental in what he
Mhm.
came up with. And maybe it was even unconscious, but we make we use all this stuff that we take in,
Mhm.
consciously or unconsciously, and sometimes we're lucky enough to notice it as it slides by and say, oh, that's interesting, and I'll
Mhm.
file that away for future reference. And sometimes it just kind of sits there in the back of your head
Yeah.
quietly until some context brings it forward. Uh,
Creativity happens from recombination.
Exactly. That's wonderful. And recombination is for me. It's one of the songwriter's greatest tools.
Mhm.
I have what I call my fragment file, where I have thoughts that and lines and words that I come up with, and my deal with myself is I never throw anything away, and so I have this bin, this hanging file or set of hanging files that I'll just sketch something down on a piece of paper and I'll stick it in my hanging file, and then every year or two I'll go and I'll just dump that thing on the floor and literally sort of sit in cross-legged and wallow in it, and I'll pick things out of it, and I'll find two scraps of paper, one that is 35 years old and one that I wrote 6 months ago, and I'll put them together. And neither of them went anywhere on their own, but I put them together, and suddenly they make sense. And recombinant bits and pieces of songwriting, seeds, songwriting germs, and suddenly they germinate, and off I go, and I can do something with them. So that's sort of a kind of a physical analog to what I think what's going on in our heads all the time. That, whether we realize it or not, is that we're sort of banking influences and shreds and images and half thoughts, and sometimes they come out sounding real, and sometimes they come out sounding surreal or supernatural. And who's to say?
Sometimes they just don't work.
If they don't work, you can stuff them back in.
Go for the next one.
Maybe they'll work next time. But
speaking of working next time, we are now at an hour.
Oh my goodness!
We have spent an hour just chatting away here.
This has been delightful, and as you can probably tell, I could continue.
We could do this for another 2 hours, but Bob has to get to his convention.
All right. Well, I don't want to get in Bob's way. Hello, Bob. You're back, and you're muted.
Yes, Bob is still muted.
You're still muted, but your lips are moving. I'm sure you're saying something profound and
totally important. He's probably telling us about B Cubed Press and what's going to happen next week.
Well, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. And thank you all for listening and being part of this. Tom, thank you for asking me. This is a real treat. It's been too long since you and I have had a chance to talk for an hour.
Exactly.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
You're unmuted now, Bob. Yeah.
Hey, talk for an hour. You guys, I can walk away and leave this thing running, and you can exit when you're done, and you'll still have your audience because you're both wonderful. And listening to it has been a pleasure while I've been updating my playlist on my Apple Music. Thank you, Tom, for introducing me to this guy.
Well,
totally glad to.
I would be remiss of me not to mention that you can find out more about all of my various shenanigans, musical and literary, at dannycarnahan.com, and my band wakethedead.org. And there's stuff that one could acquire, but you just sort of go in there. There's also you could read sample free chapters of all my novels for your amusement. And if you're moved to read the rest of them, get in touch. I'll make that work.
Well, I loved it. What I listened to, I did a sampling kind of, and it was like, wow, I wouldn't try and categorize it, even though that when I let it run itself, it wound up putting Pete Seeger, playing some Pete Seeger after you. But it's wonderful stuff. I mean, I just enjoyed it. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
I will tell you what is coming next, because I tell you, the next 3 weeks are going to be epic at B Cube Press Sunday morning. And I just didn't realize how epic this morning was going to be. And so this is like an epic kickoff to epic. So November. Instead of being epic cubed, it'll be quad epic. The beautiful thing is, next week we have got the one and only Terry Mancour, author of the Spellmonger series, just a fun book. He's celebrating the 16th book in the New York Times best-selling series still. And having been guilty of reading them all, I can tell you, at least up until the last book, he kept it fresh, kept it interesting, and stayed true to the story and built forward and just keeps building. He doesn't rehash. So it's a wonderful series, and I can endorse it almost as much as I can Danny Carnahan's music. The After that, we have obviously the last Sunday of the month. We have Jim Wright and David Gerald. Now, David has just written us, and we finally accepted. Tom, did you hear Karen squeal about 20 minutes ago?
No.
Oh, that's because
I got the door closed.
David just sent her the final version of The Trouble with Dribbles.
Okay.
A story he's written for an anthology she's my co-editor on.
So he liked the title.
Oh, trouble with he liked it, and he also just to promo it is more alternative truths, Southern edition. Bless their hearts.
Bless their hearts.
Oh, Danny, I tell you what, I make no promises because Karen will kill me if I do. But you slap together a short story that carries the talent and wisdom that you put on display today, and I can guarantee you it would be virtual at the with the power of Karen Abbey, that she would probably love it. So and then when else are you going to get to be in a short story anthology with David Gerald, where he writes a story called The Trouble with Dribble?
It would be an honor.
Well, then get your fingers on the keyboard, butt on the seat, and cynical sarcasm engaged. Because if you can write something as witty and thoughtful as what you've been saying, you should have no issues. You have just totally impressed me.
Well, thanks. I'll toss something your way. I think I got something in mind.
Okay, and then last but not least, after that, we have Sunday. We have Ellen Datlow coming in on the first Sunday of the December, and Ellen Datlow is just an epic editor. Her annual horror, I don't want to say Ellen Datlow is horrible, but when you think of horror, think of Ellen. She's awesome. And then we are working on getting Do Not Laugh. We're in talks to get Santa Claus on the third Sunday. So, that could be fun. And possibly the entire cast of A Christmas Carol. So we'll see how that one works out. But anyway, thank you guys for coming. Tom, Danny, any last words?
I just thank you both so much for making this happen. This is a real treat, and it's a great way to start my Sunday. So got to go back off and entertain my teenager.
It happens every week, and
I'll be tuning in. Now that I am aware, I'll be tuning in.
Comments this time around.
Yes, and thank you all for coming.
Cheryl says, "Epic,
epic."
The word of the day.
How much more can we aspire to?
Oh, we can aspire to become, when they find actually you can aspire to what Jesus said when he told the story of the Good Samaritan, that this is it. This is the essence of being, or words to that effect,
All right.
So that's what we can aspire to.
Very good. I join you. All right. Thank you, boys.
Thank
but
you.
Epic is good.
Epic is good. All right.
Tom. Go ahead.
I'm off. I'll see you all.
Okay. Anything, Tom? Okay, later. Say hi to the kitten and Karen for me.
Will do.
Will do. Bye-bye.